Um, Basically, the pandemic is basically a lot of people are thinking it's being weaponized, but let's take a look further into that. Every country has COVID skeptics, anti-vaxxers, and anti-maskers. The United States is hardly the only place where some people are afraid of vaccines, angry at the pandemic restrictions, open to the wild conspiracy theories, and distrustful of experts. But there's only one key reason why the world's wealthiest nation, which is home to many of the planet's top public health experts, is the red-hot bubbling epicenter of a pandemic that just won't go away. The U.S. is one of a few major countries where the people pushing against common sense measures hold positions of power, where they can shape and share policy, influence large swaths of the population, and they can weaponize the pandemic for their own political benefit. Take a look at Brazil, another place where this has happened. The president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, I'm not sure if I'm saying the first name right, known as the Trump of the tropics, faces investigations for his pandemic shenanigans and its catastrophic consequences. Some in the Republican Party have turned the coronavirus crisis into the real goal that they hope, where they hope it will propel them into a new political heights. As the current president Joe Biden tries to slow the deadly march of the virus, it's not hard to see what's behind his opponents' continuing efforts to thwart the White House's plans. It's a cynical game of unspeakable cruelty, and Biden fails to contain the pandemic. Their hope is that they can use that failure to gain control of the Congress in the 2022 midterm elections and pave the way for a new Republican president back in 2024, which they're hoping will be Trump, which hopefully, God forbid, it will not be. After Biden revealed his six-step plan against the still raging pandemic, which includes vaccine mandates, the faux news slammed him as an authoritarian, which is kind of funny because they never criticized Trump on anything he ever did. And the Republican officials vowed to fight his new mandates in court. It was another battle in their campaign to defeat Biden by undercutting Americans' public health efforts. Evidence of this strategy was visible. At the conservative political action conference in July when the crowd cheered after a speaker said that the U.S. government failed to sucker people into getting vaccinated. Biden wanted to get 70% of the population vaccinated with at least one shot by July 4th, a goal that the U.S. reached a month later. Imagine that they were effectively cheering for the virus. Meanwhile, the individual politicians are focused on advancing their own careers. It seems people like Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and others are trying to outdo each other with measures that defy common sense. One could be forgiven for thinking that they want the virus to win. Their goal is to try to emerge as the heir to the former squatter Donald Trump, who pushed against the guidance of public health experts and motivated, at least in part, no doubt by fears of what the pandemic restrictions might do to the economy and hence to his re-election prospects. Trump also urged his sycophants to take on the Democratic governors who were desperately trying to keep hospitals and morgues from overflowing with COVID victims. Like, basically, he screamed out "Liberate Michigan" and "Liberate Minnesota." And those were tweets that he tweeted in all caps before his Twitter handle was removed. It seems his would-be heirs took note of the way that Trump's bravado appeared to his sycophants, so now that they're taking up the mantle to look tough and champion some twisted version of freedom, even if it kills and kill it does. The economy, by the way, will remain vulnerable as long as the virus is thriving. The only way to solidify growth is to bring the coronavirus under control. Unfortunately, the threat of the COVID-19 is enormous, with roughly 150,000 new cases a day and 1,500 deaths a day. It's hard to fathom that much heartbreak, especially when it's preventable. This situation could, in fact, get worse, but experts warn that the longer it takes to quell the pandemic, the greater the possibility that a more contagious and vaccine-resistant variant could emerge. And to prevent that, we need common sense and discipline, something that Trump supporters don't have. DeSantis leads the pack when it comes to fighting against the reasonable measures. This supposed champion of free markets and business has raised the most restrictive measures against COVID protections. Many of the Republican-led states like Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia among them have passed laws banning proof of vaccination requirements, but Florida was one of the first to tell companies how to run their business by prohibiting them from requiring the so-called vaccination passports from customers. In other countries, showing proof of vaccination in the midst of a pandemic is now routine. But after all, it makes perfect sense. It encourages more routine. After all, it makes perfect sense. It encourages more people to get vaccinated, and it protects the vulnerable individuals and allows a return to some semblance of normality. Importantly, it also helps businesses remain open. But in the U.S., however, vaccine requirements are politically explosive. Even businesses like the cruise industry that see vaccine requirements as their only route to survival have to contend with Florida's absurd and counterproductive rules. As the cruise industry gasps to stay alive, the death sentence nearly sank it with an order that would have created fines of up to 5,000 per person for requiring proof of vaccination, which would potentially amount to millions in fines for every trip. The order boggled the mind. After all, one of the first things we learned in the earliest days of the pandemic is that on a passenger ship, COVID-19 can spread like a wildfire on dry timber. The cruise lines sued Florida and won. DeSantis is appealing the rule, but in the meantime, other businesses could face fines of up to $5,000 for asking customers or visitors for proof that they've been vaccinated. The courts have also overruled Florida's outrageous ban of face mask mandates in schools. But once again, it seems DeSantis has forgotten that the old Republican passion for communities to decide what's going on in their schools. DeSantis went so far as to threaten to withhold any funding and school officials' salaries if they defied his executive order and required students to wear masks. DeSantis is appealing that ruling as well, but a judge ruled Wednesday that schools can ignore the governor's protestations while the case moves through the courts. Losing the court battle, however, is not a big problem for DeSantis. As long as he can bask in the glow of his defiance, meanwhile, thousands of Floridians become sick and hundreds die each day. It's not just the governors, of course, but there's the right-wing media machine that steadily pumps out disinformation, that pumps out lies. And leading that charge, of course, is faux news, with its popular fake hosts like Fucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham, racist bitch, whose programs are a showcase of material to undercut the fight against the pandemic. And they have, for example, said the vaccines could be dangerous, touted unproven drugs, and they railed against the mask wearing as an untenable affront against freedom. Never mind the evidence that it helps save lives. It seems that the point of spreading all this lies and skepticism is to stoke distrust in science and institutions in order for the right-wing figures to boost their own standing and, more importantly, undercut the Biden administration and so strengthen the GOP's election changes. Playing with people's lives for sheer political gain is a morally repugnant tactic, and those who are promoting false cures and pushing against vaccines and masks to improve their political prospects are contributing to thousands of new deaths a day, destabilizing the economy and keeping the rest of us from getting back our lives. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out, and thanks for listening.